Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. James Lyons-Weiler coming to you live from the WWDNYK studios in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It is Thanksgiving week, and we have a great deal of things to be thankful for everybody who's feeling happy and healthy. For the people that are kind of upset about things that are going on, you can still be happy and healthy that you have a brain and a mind that's working. This is the week that we want to be thankful for the things that we can be thankful for. And, as bad as 2020 has been, and as crazy as it is, everything up in the world, all the crazy things that are going on, I find myself in a position where I feel so grateful for the people that have taught me so much in such a short period of time. It taught me a great deal of empathy. I've always been a person that's been highly empathetic over other people's suffering, pain and suffering. If anyone knows my story, there's good reason for it. But I don't know. It's something about it where it's almost like a meditation. When people go to church and they pray, they say the same prayers, and there's a new message sometimes in prayers. And when people meditate, they're seeking some place in the universe to think where maybe something refreshing and new will come. Well, I've had Diane Doucet on the show before, and she is always refreshing and new. She is one of these people that inspires humanity. She has a wish list. I saw her wish list of her dreams online just a little while ago, and they're just a beautiful, state to the universe what you want to see happen. She is a humanitarian and a human rights advocate that is a voice for our times. And I can't stress this enough. If you're not following her on Facebook and you're not giving due attention to the things that she has to say, and please, if you have a video podcast, get this woman on. She is the demanding conscience of our society today. The same thing that got the Jewish people through the suffering, through slavery, the same thing that got African Americans through slavery and the survivors of the slavery and the Holocaust, the same spirit of humanity. And I love her to death for that. So thank you. Diane, how are you doing today?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So today what we're going to talk about is something that's, you are very moved as you see things happening in the world and you see injustices. You are moved to speak out. You are moved to speak out in a manner that I find to be very compelling. I find it to be very inspirational. But I want for the viewers to just go over your wish list. What was your wish list that I read the other day? It's a beautiful set of dreams that you have.
It was to find my true purpose, to inspire the world, and for the healing of all.
The healing of all. That gives me chills. That absolutely gives me chills. You want every person on the planet to be healed from whatever affliction is afflicting them. You love all of humanity, and in times like these when there's stress and there's differences, especially the differences that are in the political arena in the election, we really have to pay attention to the forces that are driving us apart from each other, the forces that manipulate our perception of reality to the point where we feel like we hate people we've never even met. This is the level of consciousness and awareness that you bring with you into everything that you do. We had you on Unbreaking Science a while ago over your speech that you gave, that you wrote and you gave to a committee in Canada over a bill for mandatory vaccination. And I want to refer people to that because it is a very moving speech in which you broke down how there's a one-to-one correspondence between mandatory vaccination without proper consent and slavery. And we won't go back over that issue again, but I wanted to point the new viewers, go back to an earlier Unbreaking Science episode, and she lays it out perfectly. You can't unsee it once it's made clear to you. Is that kind of thinking. So a while back, you put out there that you had been sharing your thoughts about disabilities and public health measures to control COVID-19. I found them compelling, as usual. I found them worthy of turning over in one's mind a few times. And so I wanted to invite you to talk about it. So you were being attacked, in a way, over these views, because people found your views to be inflammatory. So do me a favor and spell out what your inflammatory view is on this issue where we have public health measures like masking and perhaps are not appropriate for the entire population. Please share.
Okay. Number one thing people need to remember is that whenever when I bring this topic, I am not trying to compare the scale of the suffering that happened to people in different eras for different reasons. I know it's controversial to say because we've been conditioned as a society to view certain words to be only attributed to a certain point of history for a certain demographic. And that's a big disservice to us all. The people who are supposed to be exempt from wearing masks due to medical reasons, their exemptions are not being honored. And there is a very high amount of people who find themselves discriminated against when they go out in public. They are either denied service or they are offered an alternate form of service. And I made a comparison in a way that if a business will not let a person with a medical condition enter their premises and they offer them alternate forms of service like curbside pickup or online only, I attribute it to the mechanisms that were used in the segregation era of having different types of facilities for different types of people, for things that were completely out of their control, like bathrooms for certain people, separate seating. Governments call that accommodations. I call that a form of segregation and discrimination. And the public is a little blind to the suffering of these people because when they do speak out about the injustice being done to them, they are attacked even more and told to stay home. They shouldn't be going out in the first place. It's like they want them to be hidden from society completely. And that is utterly unjust. And I will speak out against it.
Okay, so what we're talking about is masking. No mask, no service. You can't come in. You can't be treated as other human beings are if you can't mask. But let's slow it down just a little bit and say the following. All right, so I looked into this a little bit. There are valid medical exemptions that are recognized by medicine, published in the Journal of American Medical Association, for people that can't mask. So people that have breathing problems and asthma, etc. So these are recognized, at least in the scientific literature, the medical literature, if you will, as theoretically existing. And I know that CDC initially put out, okay, we have to have masks. No, you don't have to. They were contradictory, right? They said no masking, don't mask. The FDA said no masks, that they don't work. And then we had the CDC actually put it out there last time I checked, and this is a number of months ago on this issue, that they don't expect businesses to enforce masking, that they shouldn't intervene with patrons if they're not masking. In a way, this is kind of like they're washing their hands of it, right? they're washing their hands of it. So the individual business person in Pennsylvania right now who has a business cannot be sued for anything related to COVID-19. If you're running a business, and this is to protect the hospitals from infections that might occur, where somebody says, I went to your hospital for a surgery on my foot, and I ended up with COVID-19. I haven't been in contact with anybody. You guys infected me. But it also protects people that have businesses that just want to say, no, you know what, we're not going to deal with your breathing issue. We're not going to deal with your disability. You have to mask if you're going to have this type of service. And This type of disability discrimination, there's a history of disability discrimination. This is not new in Canada, and it's not new in the United States. There is disability that people, there's discrimination against disability all over the place. It's rampant. People don't see it. There was a reform that took place in terms of access. If you had, the buses that would have to be able to drop down, you have to, for public transport, you have to have access in and out of buildings, you have to, incorporate children with disabilities into classrooms. You can't have separate but equal because there's no such thing. That's decided. Equal protection and all of that applies. But it really raises the question: is a face mask policy lawful? Is it something that's even legal? So, and I want to commend you for bringing this issue out. There is something that our society has to remember. Our generation has no clue. I'm 50-something years old. The youngest generation is another 2 steps removed from something called the wisdom of the minority. Right? The minority view is right some percentage of the time. And I'm not talking about black minorities. I'm not talking about ethnic minorities. I'm talking about just the minority view. And in an open society with a rational government, you have the ability for the minority's voice to be heard. So if you walk into a supermarket and you're not masked, there's probably a reason why you're not masking. Right? So do you have to disclose your medical condition to go buy a loaf of bread for your children? To anyone? That's not my understanding of the rules of medical privacy in the United States. So there's a lot of issues here. What are your thoughts on medical privacy?
Well, when masking mandates were first introduced in New Brunswick, our chief medical officer during a press conference actually implicitly said that there were a list of medical conditions, including mental health conditions, that made some people mask exempt. And they didn't want people flooding the health care system to go get doctor's notes. They wanted to be on an honor basis. If someone's not wearing a mask, you assume they have a medical condition and you leave it be. But that's not what's happening across the board. A lot of people are not going out anymore out of fear of the harassment that they get everywhere that they go.
Okay, so then the American Disability Association requires reasonable modifications. So the society, the association is supposed to represent the disabled in our country. These days you have to be so careful about your language, but they require reasonable modifications of policies, practices, and procedures, such as the face mask rule, when necessary to provide goods or services to individuals with disabilities. However, the ADA does not require public accommodation to permit an individual to participate in or benefit from the goods and services if that individual poses a, quote, direct threat, unquote, to the health or safety of others. So what do you say to the people that say, okay, you might have asthma, but I don't want you carrying a virus into my shop and infecting me, my coworkers, or other people? What do you say to that?
I find correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the first time in history that healthy people are treated as if they're diseased and to be feared and to be treated as lepers. I'm sorry for the term, but the viruses have been here before COVID-19, and we didn't do that. There were epidemics before. We didn't treat each other like that. It's extreme. It's very extreme.
It is. So when we have a situation where, which you said, you're treating healthy people as if they're sick. That's an accurate description of in my view, as a scientist, because you have to have high viremia. You have to have high viral load to transmit. And if you don't have high viral load, you're not going to transmit. This is well known. It's in all of the literature on transmissibility of coronavirus, and it's very well known. You can't culture the virus, for instance, from PCR reaction, from samples from nasopharyngeal swabs, unless the PCR cycling was really short in order to reach the fluorescence needed for diagnosis. In other words, if you start with low viral load, that person, you can't culture the virus. The virus is probably dead. So if a person's not showing symptoms, there's a huge study out of Nature that showed that they looked at, 100,000 people. They traced them afterwards, and they tracked down everybody who did not have prior contact, right, with someone and did not have symptoms, and yet they tested positive. There were 300 people that they found out of 100,000, and none of them transmitted to anyone else. So if there's no transmission from the healthy, the asymptomatic, okay, no transmission from the asymptomatic that's possible, that if a person's able to walk into the store, don't go to the store if you're sick. That's what the rule should be. Stay home if you're sick. Have somebody else. If you are sick. It's not a good idea to visit grandma if you're sick. So there's a kind of an ethics here. I would not want to visit grandparents of someone if I felt like I had a cold, let alone influenza or coronavirus. So it makes sense. There's a logic to not wanting to do that because the elderly are more frail. The wisdom of my minority that I'm talking about is your voice here. You may be attacked by saying this is just like segregation, this is like slavery, but it's actually an enforced medical procedure. And a business, right? So the doctors are telling us that masking is a medical procedure, right? So if you mask someone, there are medical consequences to that action. Is a shop owner, a physician, are they able to be held liable if something goes wrong with that medical procedure? No. In Pennsylvania, they passed a law you're not liable for anything related to COVID. Nothing, ever. That's blanket liability for businesses. So the egregious treatment of others is where your voice is coming from. And what the answer to the charge that you are hijacking or cultural appropriation of the issue that you suffered under, where people said you should not compare this to segregation, you need to take a look at the fact that women are still segregated in this country. Women are still, there's discrimination. There's not equal pay for women. We are not the evolved, constitutional entities that we think that we are. We are still very, very medieval in many ways. And when I say that, we still have a lot of awakening to do, and you've certainly done your part. So go ahead and share what you're going to share.
I don't look at political correctness. I look at the meaning of words. We've lost as a society what words really mean. Yeah. Okay? And if you look at the word segregate, it's to separate or set apart from others or from the general mass. Okay? To discriminate is to distinguish by discerning or exposing differences, to make a difference in treatment. Discrimination, the act of discriminating, the process by which two stimuli differing in some aspect are responded to differently. Prejudicial outlook, action, or treatment. This is what's happening, but because we have attached those words to only be relevant and connection to things that happened in the past, for things that were linked to racial things, it is somehow not allowed to be talked about. But that's giving a free pass at discrimination. When you prohibit the use of talking about it, you're giving it a free pass to look at what's going on under our nose today. And why do we have to wait as a society? Okay, the only time that the collective conscience of people kicks in is when it becomes really, really bad and there's really big atrocities. Why can't we mention things when they're just starting and before they get really, really bad?
Yeah,
because
well,
this is only the beginning.
That's the time to take action, right? So, I was speaking with a Jewish friend of mine who said that there are many people in the Jewish community that are saying that the time to act is before it gets worse. And given the incidents that happened throughout Europe with the Jewish members of the Jewish faith under the Nazi regime. And, our society is way too quick to just dismiss any discussion of that kind of mistreatment of other people and saying, no, you're too sensitive, you're being, politically correct, come on, you're making a mountain out of a molehill, can't you just have them bring the groceries out to your car? The point is, it's a point of slippery slope on human dignity, right? First you give away your right to masks, then or to not mask on the basis of your health. I mean, I remember early on that there was a child who had autism that was forced to mask and got thrown off of an airline because he refused to mask. Okay, and I just cannot imagine as a human being, a living, breathing human being, saying to a child, "You own this problem, buddy. The well-being of everybody on this plane, any child, let alone a kid with autism, the well-being of every person on this plane is your responsibility." We are dumping all of our adulting onto the next generation in terms of vaccines of kids that you have to go to school. You've got to go to school. You won't be able to go to school. You have to go to school. That's one rule. You can't go to school. That's another rule, unless you abide by the pharmaceutical requirements of having vaccines. These are pharmaceutical requirements, not medical, pharmaceutical requirements. And so if we look at it from the perspective of, segregation, treating one group of people arbitrarily as different from another, oftentimes one of the best arguments is to turn it back around on the other, right? And say the people that are most at risk of getting sick are the people that are overweight and they smoke and are elderly, and you should do everything that you can do to be as healthy as you can. And I see you drinking your Slurpee there. So we need your new policy in your 7-Eleven where you can't drink a Slurpee. You stop selling Slurpees, right? You're hurting people. So the progressive in New York State put a limit on the size of the Coke that you could buy, the size of the soft drink that you could buy, because the sugar consumption's off the hook with the big gulp and the extra big gulp and the gulp, gulp, gulp. And okay, we have to take good care of ourselves. And in taking good care of ourselves, we have to also nurture our mind. We have to nurture the spirit. We have to nurture each other. And Diane, you're a great example of the type of human being I think every person should abide by and listen to and try to be like. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time here to close out on just this segment. Don't go away. We're going to have you back on. But what's your thoughts before I move on to our next guests?
People need to realize that some people say it's just a mask, it's just a cloth, but it's a tool of leverage, okay? Because the mask can quickly be turned around to the vaccine or other measures. And people need to realize that whenever government imposes more measures on us, stricter measures, that's when people start to treat each other very badly. And that's when snitch societies come out. And that's when people think it, because government imposed a rule on everybody, that it's open season to mistreat your neighbor out of a sense of righteousness of trying to keep people safe. Mistreating others in the name of saving people makes the action not benevolent. We cannot lose our humanity because that's what's happening. With every rule that's imposed on us as a whole, we treat each other worse and worse.
So that's a beautiful thought. That's a beautiful thought. I wanted to ask you, are you against all rules?
Oh, I'm not an anarchist. I was always a goody two-shoe growing up.
Are you now, or have you ever been a member of the anarchist party? I'm just kidding. No, listen, you're not against all rules. Of course not. You abide by rules. I mean, of course we all do. But what I wanted to do is for anybody that's going to detract or attack you on that. Of course, you stop at stop signs, right? I mean, there are reasonable and rational. The problem is when you impose irrational rules that are not founded in reason and logic and a sense of fairness and equanimity, or in this case, science. What's the science on masking? We've done shows on that. Plenty of people have talked about the studies that show you're more likely to get a respiratory virus that's not influenza if you get the influenza vaccine. Many people have shown and decided the studies that you're more likely to get a respiratory infection if you wear a mask all day and don't change it. So what do we tell our kids? Again, I'm really upset we're putting all this on our kids. You have to wear a mask all day to sit in school because you might make teachers sick. That's terrorism. They're terrifying our children. And there's no risk to them whatsoever. Practically zero risk. And kids don't transmit because, well, they deal with it with an innate immunity. Natural selection, nature, or whatever, has provided children with an innate ability to fight this virus. And it's a beautiful thing. Okay, so they don't get sick, they don't get viremia, and they're ready to go. So we need to adult. We absolutely need to adult. Okay.
We are damaging our children mentally. There's some children now that when they see television with shows where people are not social distancing, they cringe.
Yeah.
It's leaving a mark. It
is. It's an imprint. There's an imprinting that goes on, definitely, in terms of normative behavior. And we've seen this happen in other cultures as well, where they turn to the youth of Germany, they turn to the youth of Vietnam, they turn to the youth to chastise the elderly. We have to get you re-educated. You're going to be sent to re-education camps for not thinking right, to your parents and grandparents after decades of nurturing and caring. All right, Diane, so thank you for all that discussion. I really appreciate it. What we're going to do now is we're going to go right over to some near and dear friends of mine, Mike and Donna Kazee. Thank you, Mike and Donna. Thanks for being. How are you?
Okay.
Doing good.
Okay, so you just heard this discussion that I had with Diane Doucet, and I also noticed that you had some issues that you were dealing with that were striking pretty hard to the heart in real life, in real time, in your own life. Did you want to tell us about that?
Well, do you want to clarify first, like exactly? I have a lot of issues going on at the moment. I did want to take time at the beginning of this to, I'll show I'm wearing my vaccine injury is real shirt. I would just like to say that, a dear person in the vaccine risk awareness movement passed away yesterday, Sally Elkerty in New York. So I wanted to address that and say, if you go to her I think it's Sally J. Elkerty for Mayor page, where she posts her interviews, her family is posting videos, some lovely tributes. She was involved in making the world a more humorous and beautiful and fair place, and I feel like it's important to acknowledge her.
Sally was a lovely person. She's going to be sorely missed. She always had a big hug for everyone and a big smile. I'm sorry to hear about that to everybody who knew and loved Sally, and for the people that didn't get the chance to meet her. I'm sorry that you didn't get a chance to spend time with her. Thank you for that, Donna. So the topic of today is masking of disabilities, this inflammatory issue. Is there anything you would care to talk with us about, Donna? Get it off your chest and put it out there.
Probably spend about 5 hours. Any one of us in our family of 4 could probably spend the entire segment talking about it. We obviously have a family that has, lots of diversity and special needs in it. I use a wheelchair. My kids have been affected by vaccine injury. I have a kid with autism who's got extreme sensory issues. Wearing a mask is a nightmare. In addition, I think one of the things not talked about that I see parents and autism groups and around struggling with is those people, those kids and adults also do not like seeing us with the masks on. They can't interpret all of our facial expressions. It becomes just a see. You're talking about a population who generally avoid eye contact, and now all they have is eyes everywhere. Yeah. And so I think we need to acknowledge, just how difficult that is. But instead, you're getting hatred. You have people trying to tell others who can't wear a mask just to, here, you practice at home. You wear it 15 minutes at a time, and shaming them. It doesn't matter if at the end of the day they say they can't wear it. And as you covered with Diane before, they're saying, oh, just go get curbside, which there is charges involved in that. I know EBT and food stamp recipients have now, in some states, been given the go-ahead to get home and curbside pickup. But before that wasn't even set up. So the first months of it, if you happen to be on those programs and need curbside, maybe you were even more vulnerable and shouldn't actively be out in the store, or you needed home delivery, that wasn't an option. So in society, as you guys were talking about, we tend to rush ahead with this latest thing and then we'll sort out the details later. And I am one who has pushed from the very beginning to say, what's going to be the signals? What's the signal that this is too much? What's the signal that we've gone too far? Yeah. And there was never a good answer. No stopping point. Does anyone know a stopping point in all of this? I know Ohio is in its second big wave of restrictions, and the store owners, the restaurants, everyone seems to interpret this latest one, despite it having exemptions mentioned, as they're going to shut us down. If we don't do this horrible, horrible thing to you by not letting you in, they're going to shut us down. So you can't come in because we'll be shut down and then we won't have a business. But at what point have we lost our humanity in this? At what point do we realize that, and the other thing I take issue with, I could ramble on and on about this for hours.
That's what we're doing here today, Donna. Take your time.
As a biomedical engineer, there's absolutely nothing about what type of mask, how to wear it, how to properly care for it. If you slap a piece of one, ply toilet tissue over your face, so to speak, in a lot of stores, you're good. So what is that saying about what the science actually is?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can talk about that for a minute because, as I recall, the CDC's put out a notice at the beginning, and this has to be an N95 medical grade respirator mask. That's what's studied, right? And then they studied cloth masks, and cloth masks are either no good or worse. In all the studies in medical settings, right, that I've seen, worse. To use a cloth mask, CDC says you have to have one that wraps around your head 20 times. The 20 layers, right? Not just the little thing with the rubber band or the little lacy, right? And so you're exactly right. It's a canard of, a Trojan horse for social control. I believe that 100%, to get people to say, I care, you don't, you're not wearing a mask, you must not care. But what about the woman who's been raped and had a hand held over her face? And she cannot stand the feeling of having the lower part of her face covered because of PTSD. Can you go to your psychologist and get a psychological? Why do we put the onus of this burden on other people when the risk of transmission is so low? The risk of transmission is, if you're healthy, it's just nonsense. It's absolutely nonsense. I will take issue with the Journal of the American Medical Association on what they've written about in this. There's an article by Dorfman and Ross where they call it a quandary. This is not a quandary. This is a straightforward situation. You have people who cannot mask. They self-identify on the basis of their own personal experience, their knowledge of their medical situation. I can't mask. So we went through this discussion here and there where we said, well, what if I had a shirt that said, "Can't mask, don't ask"? Well, the Jewish members of our community be like, yeah, I'd rather die than put a sign on me that differentiates me from somebody else intentionally. They're not wearing a mask. Don't ask. It's none of your business. The businesses that say we're going to be shut down by their state, don't put it on your customers. Go talk to your state. Stand up to your state. There are companies I know with restaurants, exercise places that are staying open specifically to demonstrate that they have the ability to stay open past curfew. They have the ability to do that, and they don't get shut down. They don't get shut down because there's no law. Public health policy has no tooth on this. They can bring the sheriffs all they want. Go away. You need a warrant. What are you charging me with? Show me the legislation that has been passed that says you have the right to shut down my business on the basis of the fact that you caught somebody without a mask in my store and you didn't first solve the problem on whether or not that person had a medical exemption. It's lunacy. So, tell us about firsthand experience. How frustrating has it been for you and for your family? I want to go there. People deserve to know what they're doing to people.
Right.
Unless you don't have permission from those involved. If you don't have permission from those involved, I don't want to force it.
Actually, my touch. My daughter is in the background, and I would first like to start with her because she has decided to go open with this.
Good.
And when
Good
she
for her.
was a little girl, she had sneaked out of the house one evening and she wanted to take a walk at night. And we had no idea, but she was grabbed by someone and assaulted, and her mouth was covered. That person was also, he was covered. And I won't go into any extent of that, but early on in this, she was doing all right. The premise was we support everyone's right to mask or not mask based on their comfort. Even if we personally feel that cloth mask is a placebo and possibly a health risk for you if you're not doing it properly,
Right.
We support your right to have that. So it was easy when we could say they have a right to do that. It makes us a little uncomfortable, but we respect their right. When they changed it and more people demanded that others mask, her friends were posting things on social media. I have to say the teen and young adult Instagram virtue signaling has been off the charts this year.
Yeah.
So she had people contacting her asking where was her mask, telling her ways that she could get used to it, telling her that she was directly responsible for killing their grandma. No idea what she had been through. She did share with a few people who said, we're sorry, but you can just stay home till this is over. You don't need to go out, and as you know, she's a competitive ballroom dancer.
She's a great dancer. I love watching the videos and her smile and her talent, and she's beautiful. And the photography, oh my God, she's a gem. You should be so proud.
Yeah. Thank you. And so, their answer for her was just stay put, stay home. You don't deserve to be out. So in addition to that horrifically traumatic childhood experience that she is reliving, by the way, by seeing waves of people only in masks, and then angry at her for having the gall to be outside with her face uncovered. She is dealing with her friends directly telling her she doesn't deserve to be part of society. So probably of all of us, she has experienced the brunt of it because she is, she's a teen, she's active. She really wants everyone to kind of see every other person's point of view, having grown up in diversity.
Yeah.
And so she sees a lot of different points of view, so she's very outspoken. And that kind of hit her like a sack of bricks this year because nobody in her peer group is standing beside her, in general.
Well, she's going to be a governor of Ohio and more. I think I'm going to start that campaign right here on Unbreaking Science 2020. Just name the year, and I'm there. I will stump for her anywhere. She's rational, smart, brilliant, compassionate. You guys couldn't be happier with your kids, but they're just and your son, such a rock star. I can't wait to get a hold of an axe and jam it out with him. But let me do you guys a favor here. This Journal of American Medical Association article that I mentioned earlier, just so people that are listening can understand. This is way back in July 10th, but nevertheless, this is published, and we're not going to let it die here. You have Title III, Prevention of Disability Discrimination in the United States in full and equal enjoyment of services. But what I wanted to go into was the medical. Listen to this here. Evidence for exemptions. We're going to talk about exemptions, which is kind of a compromise. It's not really what we want, but I wanted to let you know that we're farther down the pike than we think we are. Few guidelines exist regarding medical exemptions beyond the CDC's recommended exemptions. Children younger than 2 years, people with difficulty breathing. Okay, so I think that if you can't handle a mask over your mouth because you were attacked, because you're going to lose your mind, you're going to hyperventilate. That's a breathing issue. Just it would get there, but. And anyone unable to place or remove the mask, there are certain categories of disability that undoubtedly warrant medical exemptions. In this evidence-free zone, they say clinicians must make individual determinations as to whether patients should be exempt from mask wearing. I'm sorry, that's wrong. We should not have to go to the medical doctors, so we don't have to impede ourselves from breathing if we have breathing issues. All right. So some individuals, particularly children with sensory processing disorders, that's important, they mention it, may be unable to tolerate a mask. So it is recognized that kids with sensory processing disorders will have a problem. People with PTSD, I don't know. Facial deformities that are incompatible with masking are an additional category of exemptions. Other situations, such as chronic pulmonary illnesses without an active exacerbation, are less clear. Then they go on to say that these people with pulmonary issues, well, they might be more prone to having a virus of some kind, so they might be more prone to having SARS-CoV-2. And then go back to the scientific literature, Journal of American Medical Association, that shows that if you get a thimerosal-containing flu vaccine, you're more likely to have a respiratory illness. So what they're really saying is that the people who get the flu vaccine that are more prone to having respiratory illness every year, it's not clear if they should be able to go without a mask, even if they can't breathe. Even if they can't breathe. So to me, it's not a quandary. To me, it's 100% straightforward. I want to thank you and your daughter for being, for especially her, for being so brave and allowing her story to so brave, unbelievably brave, to allow this story to be told. And I want to ask everybody to share this episode of Unbreaking Science everywhere that you go. And from now until Thanksgiving, share this one, because right now, right here, what we're saying is we have a live, breathing human being who cannot tolerate a mask, who is being socially isolated. She's being treated differently on the basis of her inability to wear a mask, and the society can't wrap their brain around that. So we need this episode out there. We need to be thankful for her. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for bringing that forward. Is there any other thoughts that you wanted to share?
I mean, there's lots of things, the inconsistencies, like with restaurants or, certain grocery chains, where you could shop for 4 or 5 months, people who see you every day, everything's fine, all good, fine to a point, without wearing the mask, that is. And then all of a sudden, these new orders come out where they're scared, like Donna said, where they're going to get fined. And all of a sudden, you can't come in. No one wants to deal with you because you're deemed unsafe. Even if you're like 6 to 10 feet away from them, they have nothing to do with you because you're unsafe. Mm-hmm. And when you then have to rely on, like, let's say, curbside, you have no idea if they're going to give you anything that you can realistically use. And with us, we have an extreme health dietary issue.
Of course, so you've got such dietary restrictions. Of course, I never thought about that. Exactly. Thanks for bringing that up.
They want to take out of the equation for me to then be able to keep my health compromised family from potentially getting the right foods to stay healthy, which kind of defeats the purpose. And that's probably the most biggest thing that we've had to deal with in the past 2 weeks is, it's just an issue where stores don't either want to deal with you at all, or you have to go wait, and like I say, this, won't give the chain, but I have to go wait at customer service. So the other night I go in, I get harassed about the mask, but I don't care. I just ignore it. I go in, I get what I need. I go to customer service because I already know that no one else wants to deal with me. And guess what? There's no one at customer service. So I'm sitting there for 5 minutes. People can see me just sitting there and they ignore it. So I get my phone out and I call their phone to get to customer service. And they see the phone ring, and they can probably assume that it's me calling it. So finally, someone comes over begrudgingly. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's me calling. I'm trying to get someone here to help me because I'm too unsafe to go to any of the cash registers now, even though you guys know me for, years. And they roll their eyes and they're like, oh, I'll eventually get someone here. And they didn't even go get anybody. It was another cashier who's known me for a long time who overheard it. And he came away from his station to come over and help me. But that lady didn't even go try to help me at all. She just walked on and pretended like she was going to get someone when she really didn't. And that's their whole plan. Their whole plan is just to try to, ignore you to get rid of you and, either follow the rules or else. So yeah,
So it seems like
it's been a big issue in the last couple of weeks more than anything.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about that, but that's why you're here. So get it off your chest. Good. What I want to say is, it seems like they're more concerned about liability than they are about having, people eat their food. And when it comes to that, we have we have a real problem with our understanding of Maslow's hierarchy, I would say, right? So 99.99 something percent of people will survive a coronavirus infection. There's no doubt about that. If you're elderly, listen, I'm not sick. I don't have the virus, et cetera, et cetera. But if I'm out in public, I'm going to cut a wide swath not to make somebody who I know is at risk, who's elderly, feel uncomfortable. They're scared. There's no doubt about it. Especially if they watch mainstream television, mainstream news. They are frightened to death. And that level of stress itself, the anxiety, has to have a cost in terms of morbidity and mortality on that population. But I'll do the right thing, and I'll try to, cut a wide swath and, throw my mask on and so on. But I can do that. For the people who can't do it, this is a conundrum. They don't deserve to be castigated because we can't figure it out. It's wrong from a humanitarian perspective for us to put our fears on other people and project our fears, our unknowns on other people. If I don't see somebody with a mask, I presume, well, first of all, it's not my job to know or care whether they have a mask. But second, I presume if I bother to think about it, hey, you have this reason for not wearing a mask, and so be it. All right? To me, it's like the color of somebody's shirt. Why did you wear a red shirt or a blue shirt? So the rest of society is largely blind to the issue of disabilities. And so I thank you both, and I thank your family for coming out. I want to give you a little bit of time to close out this segment before I bring you and Diane together to have a conversation where you can relate with each other. Okay?
Right. I don't know where you want me to go with closing it out. I think, what I've said from the start of this is we absolutely believe in radically protecting the vulnerable while at the same time allowing those who are not at risk to work. And I think that people with disabilities and, serious medical issues and, older people sometimes lose sight of the fact that in order to have a society where everyone matters, you have to be progressive. People have to be making good money. They have to feel confident in themselves. Once that stuff goes away, and we've seen it over and over with the elderly in homes and places, once it goes away, the threads of our humanity slowly unravel, and we start seeing atrocities that we'll be figuring out for decades. And I am very much like in the previous segment. You said, why don't we catch this when it's happening? Right at the beginning. And I think it's beyond the time to stop ourselves, but we still at any point have a time to stop ourselves and say enough is enough. We can make a choice every day to be kind and understanding, and understanding works both ways, as you said. I have been very adamant to say we will social distance. We're not going to be right up on top of people demanding in their faces that they accept us. Out of courtesy, we're not going to tell people they can't wear a mask. I've seen it go the opposite way in a reaction, and I understand that reaction because some people are fighting for their fundamental right to be out and about right now. So we have to remember that.
Thank you. That's true. So, ladies and gentlemen, what you just heard was a rabid, crazy anti-masker, not a rational, compassionate human being. That's sarcasm, Donna. So the whole point is, these are smart people. These are people who've put time, life, energy. They're vested in the rights of their families, the rights of their people, the rights of all people. And so this is an interesting sociological experiment. I'm not sure if it's ever been done on a show like this before, but we're going to go hostless for a little while and see what happens when we bring a couple of activists together who I wish you guys could be together. So there you go. Have it out. How you guys doing?
Okay. Good to see you back. It was wonderful listening to you, and I remember your speech. I kept saying, Diane Doucet, who is that? Who is that? And then your speech was one that I made my whole family listen to at one point. So when you started speaking and Jack mentioned that, I'm like, oh, that's her. So
It's thank you so much. It's getting harder to find on YouTube, that speech. You have to know where to look for it. You have to go on the channel Nova Scotia Alternative Autism Awareness channel and scroll down the videos to find it. If you do a search, you won't get it. I have a question for you. Like, I don't know if it's like that where you live, but here, government and media together are creating a recipe that makes people mistreat each other. And our elected officials go on the news or in articles, and they blame people that don't comply with the rules for the reason why they are restricting more and more and more and making people's lives difficult. And when they do that, the people, it's like a collective punishment. They view the people that are labeled in the news as anti-maskers, anti-vaxxers, conspiracy theorists. They lump all those people together and hate them because they think they're the reasons why their lives are being so restricted. Do you agree with that statement?
Absolutely.
Oh, totally.
It's like a recipe that they've, paraded out multiple times. The idea is we would be over this, or we could get over this in this, indefinite, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes 2 months time span, if people would just cooperate. If they just had been good and done what they were told to do, this would be over for everyone. And it doesn't matter what alternative data and information you give. The worst part of it is that they then pretend compassion for those who just can't wear a mask. So they put that messaging in there to absolve themselves for what they know is coming in response to the rest of the message. So,
yeah, like I view it like the government has removed the blame from their shoulders, from their own actions, and as they have deflected it onto the people to fight amongst themselves and blame each other, while it's the government's own actions that are making people's lives very difficult. It's like gaslighting.
oh yeah, it is definitely gaslighting, and it is played out so well. And people, you're not allowed to mention, as it relates to, the racial segregation, or, the times leading up to the Holocaust, or, any other moments in history that we've really had the same map, the same game plan that played out. It's so different now. It's just, we're doing it differently, and this is for your own protection. And the mixed messaging is so difficult. So we mostly turn off the media, but it's still invariably the messaging gets in. And you're right, they've weaponized the people. That's what they've done, so that their dirty job is done, because if everyone hates you when you go out, you eventually stop wanting to go out. So
Beautifully
things,
put. Go ahead. Keep going.
One of the things where people get very offended if people make parallels to dark chapters of history is that they compare the end result of what happened. The atrocities, the death toll, and that's what they focus on. But they don't see that we're just pointing out that there's parallels in the mechanisms that led to those dark chapters. It's like the same playbook is being used. It's just we haven't gotten to really huge atrocity scale. But people need to realize it's the methods used are similar.
Yeah, so in terms of the scale, right? I mean, is it a valid comparison to say that there was a fire at my house, or my house burned down to the ground? They both were a fire. There is concern about a fire in someone's house. And if they publish it on the Defender, I sent in an article where the analogy that I give in terms of what we're doing for testing and testing everyone. It's like, first thing I said, it's like, it's worse than going out in your backyard and killing all the bees to make sure that you find the murder hornets. It's 2020. I worked it out. Somehow I got murder hornets into what I was writing about. But then I said, it's more like burning down your house so you don't have to wash your dishes. That's what, right? Testing everyone. With all the false positives, I think the false positive rate is now above 50%. I've done the math and all the science, the science-based episode. They're concerned about asymptomatic transmission. When the science shows there's no asymptomatic transmission, they're burning down their house because they don't want to do the dishes. That's what that. So we can use analogies that are not based in history. That are, right? There was an agenda, a specific global takeover agenda by the Nazis, by Japan, by the Axis powers. And that agenda is present in a different way with the pharmacalization of our immunity, or the pharmaceutical mafia that is really very truly trying to be everything for everyone in terms of their health. They want a monopoly over our health. There's a great book that Grace read. I haven't got to read it yet, but it's called The Drug Story. This has been going on for decades and decades. It was, the Better Business Bureau was created specifically so businesses could get a corner on the market, not so you could call up and complain that your hamburger was undercooked. The Better Business Bureau was created as part of that cartel. The drug cartel has taken over. So when you say that it's not as big as, or not at the same scale, we don't know the scale of the ongoing onslaught of vaccine injury because of the denialism. We really don't know the scale of how many people that have died from COVID-19, right? Died because they got another respiratory illness, because they were forced to mask. They were given a misdiagnosis of COVID-19 because the tests have false positives. We have no idea the scale. So part of the answer there is if you get criticized and you say, you can't compare this to anything like that scale. So I don't know what the scale is. Fine, fair enough. I don't know. The end result is not there yet. So you're right, Dan. I agree with you. We're still in the throes of this particular problem. And this particular problem is society's reaction, not the virus. All right. So you guys are great. I'm glad that worked out for a while. That was fun. That was nice. I couldn't fit myself on the screen with a box. So I said, what do I need a box for? I'll just come in like this. Little Jack. So I want to give you both another closeout. I know I'm not expecting anything when I ask for a closeout. And just to make sure everybody has a full meal of Diane and a full meal of Donna and Mike. Any closing thoughts, words of wisdom, parting shots? What do we do? How do we solve the problem? That's where I want to go.
I would say that in order to have change anywhere in society, the number one thing that needs to be done first is to have a change of heart. If there's no change of heart, there can be no change in our world. So people need to look at their conscience, and they need to start doing what's right instead of what is demanded, and speak out when things become unjust. I know it's scary to do, but if you see somebody being mistreated, say it. Normalize the conversation so that people can be made into human beings again instead of labels to be hated and mistreated. We have potential to create a beautiful world. It's in our grasp if we want it. But we have to make a change within ourselves first.
Beautifully said. Thank you. Kazee.
Oh, I totally agree with her on that front, and also just educating people. I mean, it's just, the more that we can get the word out, obviously whether they'll believe you or not is a whole different story, but at least planting the seed on top of, what Diane mentioned there. I think those combinations of things are at least my get-go on what would be the first steps. I don't know if Donna's got anything different.
Yeah, I think education is good. I think having conversations is good. We've tried to continue having conversations with people, and I have to say it's been very difficult. I have not unfriended or unfollowed or cut out anyone in this who wants to continue following. And I have a policy of that because I can take it. My kids can't so much.
Yeah.
But if I show them that, this person is struggling, they're, not dealing with this well, they're coming from a place of fear, and eventually we're going to give space for them to come out of this and still maintain their dignity and understand, that I'm still here. I still have a right to be. That has been the thing that we've tried to do all along. So I have been proud of myself. My daughter's doing dishes, so that's the noise in the background. But I have been proud of, myself that I haven't had to do this, even though I've gotten into some skirmishes with people online. And I feel very strongly about different things. I think, always giving someone an opportunity. One of Peyton's best special education teachers in 4th grade, she said, and this stuck with us over the years, she said, Peyton, now is the time to change your day. From this point on, you can do better, and we're just not going to worry about what happened before. So now is the time to change this.
Beautifully stated. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of a closeout here, leave you guys on the screen because I want your reactions. The first thing that I would say is don't be an explicative. Just stop being explicatives, okay? And I did that for Bernadette because she doesn't like it when I bring explicatives. She likes to share that she has a following. It's like, oh my God, my ears, whatever. But the point is, don't be an explicative. Listen to what your 4th grade teacher taught you and what your mom taught you about caring for others. And most importantly, if you have forgotten empathy and you don't know empathy anymore, imagine if you couldn't breathe yourself and someone was telling you, you cannot buy food to feed your family. Imagine if you couldn't breathe, or if you were put into shock or distress over a memory of an assault and you were forced to cover your mouth simply to go buy, like any teen would want to, any young adult would want to, a new set of jeans. You have to go through that trauma again of remembering that. It's a reminder this happened to you. Imagine then having to be a strong young person to speak out against your peers. Put yourself in the position of a young person, 16 to 21 years old, and you have to speak out against your peers in social media and say, hey, this is real. You guys need to pay attention, and they don't listen to you. Imagine you, yourself, society, put so many people across the country in that position right now with your, I am going to get sick if you are healthy and walk into a store where I'm in the store. We've been here long enough. We know better now. We remember what your mom taught you. Remember whoever taught you that you should care. When you did something wrong as a child, and they said, well, how would you feel if someone did that to you? We're not promising any threats. We're not saying any threats, but just for a moment, contemplate for yourself. How would you feel if you had to do something that you knew was going to terrify you or stop your health, hurt your health, but you could not breathe, you have asthma or whatever? We're better than that, people. We are so much better than that. We can wake up. Don't listen to the hype. Don't listen to the BS. Yes, people die from coronavirus. At this point in time, if somebody's scratching their head saying, wait a minute, don't you care? Yeah, I do. I think coronavirus initially, due to the way that people were treated, was 10 times worse than the influenza. That's my math. 10 times. And now it's 3 times in the United States. 3 times worse. It's like having 3 flu seasons at once. Yes, it's real. But we also know that we can still maintain our humanity. I want to thank my guests, Diane Doucet and Michael and Donna Kazee. You guys made my day that you could do it today. So with all the gratitude that I can send your way, thank you. And share. Sending out love to Sally Eckerly and her family and the people who loved her, and sending a lot of love to your kids today, the Kazees. Thank you so much. All right, so come back again after Thanksgiving. We'll be doing more Unbreaking Science. I have a whole new thing to talk about. This Vaxxed-Unvaxxed study is published, ladies and gentlemen. We are there. It is there. It's peer-reviewed. It is an amazing piece of work. I have to thank a lot of people that helped out along the way. People double-checking things to make sure that things were accurate, et cetera, et cetera. But it is an amazing objective piece of science, if I say so myself. That's what my colleagues tell me. That's what scientists from around the country who are emailing me but dare not do so in public are saying, Dr. Jack, you've done it again. And do more. They want more. So make sure you go to the IPAC website, ipaknowledge.org. Find the IPAC Vax Done Vax study. It is with Dr. Paul Thomas. Dr. Paul Thomas did his part too, and there are other people who actually don't want to be named because they're afraid of the threats that might come their way for having been involved in data de-identification. So rock on, enjoy your turkey, or as we can consider it perhaps a funeral for the bird, because you can go ahead and socially aggregate and mourn the loss of this generous bird that gave all of its juicy, luscious white meat and dark meat. If you're not vegetarian, I'm sorry. Mourn the loss of your bird with your family. Give them a big hug and tell them Dr. Jad says happy Thanksgiving. And thank you all for all of your continued support. Go to patreon.com, WWDNYK. If you want to see more Unbreaking Science episodes, you can become a monthly donor there. Patreon.com, WWDNYK. That stands for What We Do Not Yet Know. This is the What We Do Not Yet Know studios, and we have not much more to talk about. I want to say, here we go. I'm grateful for this young lady's music. You should be too.
Hi everyone, I'm your host, Dr. James Lyons Pyler, aka Dr. Jack. In this episode, we're going to review the evidence that science is broken. This is not a true story.
Will be told, the people will know the price of corporate science really taking its toll. Whistleblowers blow, public health data low. They say the science is settled, but how do they know?
Science.
Ask questions, critically think, you should try it. It's pure, unadulterated science. I'm breaking science.
Unbreaking Science.
You can't deny it, you sure can't buy it. Fact check, use your brain, don't be quiet. It's pure, unadulterated science. I'm breaking
Unbreaking
science.
Science.
Using the tools of the trade to back up what we say. You can't be silent when it comes to unbreaking science. Let's light the truth up, next level ultraviolet. You've got a hypothesis, do a critical test. Make an observation without being biased. Use logic and reason mixed with evidence. Look for patterns and results with significance. Calculate them numbers, real accurate, or else your findings won't be legit. Don't cherry pick, but be skeptic, cause broken science, it makes us sick. That science is being funded by the very same people that run it, so they can promote a product, so they can make that money. Try not to laugh, cause this ain't nothing funny. All these science-like activities, no joke, they call them studies. Hand-picking sample groups and no true placebos. Losing public trust the more and more that we know. The truth will be told, the people will know the price of corporate science really taking its toll. Whistleblowers blow, public health data low. They say the science is settled, but how do they know?
Unbreaking Science.
Ask questions, critically think, you should try it. It's pure, unadulterated science. Unbreaking science.
Unbreaking Science.
You can't deny it, you sure can't buy it. Fact check, use your brain, don't be quiet. It's pure, unadulterated science. Unbreaking science.
Unbreaking Science.